Evening all on Play Chess, and I'm streaming to YouTube as well. So this week I thought we could have a look at some of the US Chess Championship games, but there's just one interesting game I'd like to show you as a backdrop to the US Chess Championship. So this very interesting game caught my eye. It was played a little bit earlier in the year. Gata Kamsky was playing against Sam Shankland earlier in the year in the Eastern Class Championships in Sturbridge, and I thought it was fascinating from one perspective. I just want to show you this game first. So Gata Kamsky and Shankland, they're both playing in the US Championships, but this is earlier in the year, so March. D4 from Gata Kamsky, and it was a London system, knight f6, the dreaded London system. And Shankland replied classically with d5 after e3, e6, and now a slightly unusual move, knight d2. So London system with a difference. Still not blocking the c-pawn, of course. The c-pawn can go here. So Gata Kamsky is kind of a specialist in these sort of systems. C5 and now c3. So this dreaded triangle, it's like a Slav defense in reverse in some respects. Knight c6. The knight supports it, and we'll get I'll try to get you to the interesting bit of this game. So bishop d6, bishop drops back, and black's play looks fairly logical. It looks as though, almost as though black's playing for e5 now, so white has to stop that, so knight e5, but pressure can be brought to bear on e5 with knight d7. And if necessary, I think it would be quite dangerous for something like f6 because of the h7 square here. So it's really just the challenge of the piece. At the moment, this seems safe enough. And white, though, he doesn't support the knight with f4. He actually plays knight takes d7, and it looks as though is this a bit dry, this continuation after bishop takes d7, bishop takes d6. So two exchanges. Does it look a bit dry? What has white got here? Has white got anything at all? And now white played d takes c5. Okay, and here, well, what's the problem with black's position? You'd think there's no problem here. h7 doesn't seem that vulnerable. You know, if queen h5, then g6, surely queen h5, g6. But can you see what white actually played in this position? If I give you 20 seconds, what would you play here with white? And it doesn't look as though black's done that much wrong visually. That's why I think it's quite interesting, this game. So if I give you 20 seconds to catch up here and throw some moves out, what would you play here with white? By the way, yes, the Evolution of Style series, I will be doing some more of those soon, in the next few weeks probably. So so this position, you should have, I hope you caught up with it on stream and everywhere. Play chess. What would you play here with white? Any ideas? Has everyone caught up with the position yet? Okay, h4 has been thrown from Play Chess. No, it wasn't h4. So anything else? I'll show you now. It was quite amazing actually, this continuation, because as I say, it looks as though black hasn't done that much wrong. Bishop takes h7 check, the Greek gift sacrifice, but it looks as though this knight's not in the right place. You know, there's no knight g5 quickly, so what's the point of this? Well, actually, the point here is that after queen h5 check, king g8, there's an annoying resource for black to actually simulate the Greek gift to get a knight to g5 quite rapidly. How can you get this knight here? Does anyone have any ideas how to get the knight there? What would you play in this position? Okay, yeah, it's knight e4, remarkable. The queen's a loose piece here, and it actually can be attacked, and that's pinned. That pawn is pinned here. And black plays what seems to be a very good move in the circumstance. Yeah, well done on knight e4s, guys. So now here I'll put on a kibitzer. This is getting a bit complicated. I have analysed this before as well, but I want the kibitzer here as well. One of black's best moves here is actually queen c4 or queen b5 apparently. So in the game queen c4 was played. If queen e7, this is very bad. Just simply knight g5, so threatening that mate. And this is terminal. Black would actually have to give up the queen because it's still pretty terminal like this. For example, queen is actually blocking the escape route. So that's the worst square. Given the queen can't actually go to d6 either, there's not too many squares. If it goes to b6, still knight g5. Okay, now black has to make an escape plan for the king, that e7 square. But here queen takes, and this is still very strong for white. White's actually got, in this position, although a piece down, white has a very strong position here after castling queenside. Black's in severe trouble because white is actually going to try and play e4 using another pin, and then maybe bring this rook round or bring this rook round, and is actually almost defenseless, black's position here. Here's an example continuation. Queen g6 threatens mate. Now h4, for example, to bring the rook round. And what does black do here to stop this? It's slow motion, like checkmate, where black's pretty helpless now to what's going on. White just builds up. It's like +10 here, and then black just collapses. So that's just an example how queen b6 seems to fail. So queen c4 looks good in the circumstance. So knight g5. So white's invested a piece here, and it seems quite remarkable, even with this improvement, that this still is a very strong attack. So rook fd8 protecting the bishop. White takes, check. Now castling like the variation before with the queen on b6, I don't think this is very good here, because queen takes a2, and it's actually given as equal now, this position, because of these checks, I think, that are going on. So actually white has to play differently. Rook d1, and still now there's an idea potentially of h4 to get the rook round. Black plays e5, so white's a piece down here, but there's such sensitive spots around the king. So check, and now e4. So again, using that pin like the other variation we saw, knight e7, trying to offer a piece sacrifice. And now white's, what else does black do? Because white is now threatening to bring the rook in. It's just a very difficult position to defend. It may actually be technically lost here. The engines give +3, even though white's a piece down. So this is quite remarkable. There's a pin here, and there's a pin here, and this rook's coming round in slow motion. So anyway, so black tried to give up a piece back, and it didn't really help. He went for a mate here, That was protected, and now queen f7, check, queen takes, threatening mate again, and we have queen h5 check, protecting e2 now, queen h7, so still threatening mate there, check, and now a king hunt, queen takes, rook takes d5, queen f6 check, and here black resigns. A game continuation might be king c7, knight e6 check, here knight takes d8 check, and it's a total disaster. Black would never get time to mate on e2 here. For example, like this, knight d3 could defend everything. So it's just a very interesting Greek gift game. But funny enough, this whole thing, believe it or not, has occurred about 5 times according to ChessGames.com before. So you could consider it a London system trap line. And in fact, there has been a game where black didn't. So all the games where black's taking here usually loses. There's a game black actually won with queen c7 instead, just temporarily doing a pawn sack to avoid this stuff. So it just shows how dangerous the Greek gift can be, even in the most innocuous of openings, the London system. So with that little background interesting game, let's have a look at some US Championship games now. So why not stick with Gata Kamsky in the first instance? He's had a run of draws, but he did have one decisive game. So let's have a look. Now the London system is quite a close relative of the Chompovsky. In his game against Sergey Erenburg in round 4, we saw this bishop g5, this early bishop g5 here. So Kamsky playing white. And after h6, the bishop dropped back. c6, knight f3. Okay, and it looks as though after queen b6, is this actually an interesting opening for white? After b3, it looks as though there isn't too much going on, and black's doesn't seem to have too many troubles. You know, he's provoked, it seems, some dark square weaknesses. Are these useful or not? e3, e6. Bishop swaps off. It looks a bit on the dry side at the moment, but the b pawn does support c4 more comfortably. Knight f5. Bishop drops back. And trying to whiz to the interesting moments of this game now. So after knight d2, black took on g3 and played g6. Now white broke in the centre with e4, and the interesting thing here is that black, well, he doesn't want to face this h-file dynamic play. He castled queenside, maybe hoping for a safer time for his king, and white castled kingside. And here it looks as though black has to play quite accurately. I'm not sure this next move, it might not have been that. Well, actually the engine likes it. Okay, so e5 was played. It looks actually quite logical in many respects. The rook staring down at the queen here. White played c5, and the queen drops to c7. And now we see the move queen c3. Now perhaps here is a small mistake actually. The engine suggests f5 is a mistake in this position compared to e takes d4. So e takes d4 looks a little bit counterintuitive maybe in some respects, but after queen takes, okay, the rook apparently from the engine point of view can just move here, and that should be okay to h7. This should be okay for black. In fact, black might be, you know, yeah, doing decently. On rook g8, queen c4, looking at that, it might be quite annoying actually. This is nasty. But with rook h7, I know this is weird, that f7 should be an issue, but that looks to be okay for black. In the game though, we see that black seemed to get in trouble by playing f5. The problem with this, in one instant it goes to almost, you know, quite a significant advantage, well, a little bit advantageous now for white, and difficult to play for black, because after knight d6 check, bishop takes, c takes, white gets this passed pawn now on e5. Okay, and it's quite nasty that black's attack here is going to take quite some time to break through to white's king. That's built like a strong fortress. In the meantime, the queen side looks a little bit shaky now because white can start to throw the pawns at the king, and he does so, b4. So he's going to be putting pressure down the queen side. So king b8, trying to secure the fortress. a4, putting pressure on white's powerful pawn, that's protected. Knight f8, looks like a blockade square is useful here, e6. But now b5, and this starts to get a bit scary. Black wants to keep the lines closed against his king and ends up playing c5 here. White wants to open the lines and plays b6 as a temporary pawn sack. If a takes, this could get quite nasty with maybe just this. That will do. And a5. And this is very dangerous for black's king. So black wants to keep these lines closed. So he plays actually a6, and there's something interesting here about this position. Black is 26-30, and I do find these games kind of frightening to think that such high FIDE rated players could be potentially crushed from these positions. Well, he's left this dangerous pawn on b6, and there's a dangerous pawn on e5. The pawn marks the d6 square, but how exactly does white build up the advantage here? Well, we're about to see now. Rook ad1 after knight e6. First of all, he supports this pawn with a5. Black does I don't know what black's doing in this position, but g5 looks as though it might be threatening in the future. But now this blockade is kind of put under great scrutiny with rook d6. Does black want to be faced with this gigantic pin on e8 if he takes this rook? This would be horrible. If he takes this rook, e takes, queen f6. Very, very nasty pin. And also white can actually just munch these pawns as well, threatening to munch these pawns in this position. So queen e7 maybe takes this, and it's just very nasty position to have here. White can even try fixing the pawns, and it's just unpleasant. I think these are like attacking resources restricting the opponent's king in the endgame as well. So it seems black didn't want to take on d6. He plays h5, and white just builds up now on the d file with rook ed1, f4, and now queen c4 actually threatens something exceptionally nasty tactically to do with this pawn. Well, can you see what white would be threatening in this position now after queen c4? What is the threat here for white if I give you 20 seconds in this position? Any ideas? What was white threatening? What is the threat you have to deal with black here, which helps explain the next move? Okay, on Play Chess you guys have got it. I think you're seeing it instantly, of course. So yeah, some of you have got it to see the threat. It's very, very important to see these, otherwise, yeah. On string, you should be getting to the position soon. So what is white threatening? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yep. So if black just carries on, say black carried on like this, queen takes e6. It's pretty nasty because that pawn is cutting off the escape squares. If queen c8 here takes, well, white's a knight up, funny enough, so that will do. Just fg. So queen takes is on the card. So black resorts to playing king c8. So you can see the damage this is causing these pawns already. So now g takes f4, and now if knight takes f4 here, then the c pawn drops, and that's pretty nasty, because then actually the queen would drop after as well, which is pretty nasty. So black plays g takes, and now rook 1 to d5 starts to threaten other nasties like this. In fact, in this immediate position, this might not be the greatest threat, but after what black played now at move 32, it was a total disaster. Black should play something. What should black play? Apparently, no. Apparently, it is pretty diabolical, actually. Whatever black plays in this position. If the king went back to b8, can you see what white plays in this position? If I give you 20 seconds here. So why can't the king go back to b8? So white's playing this position. What would he do here? Any ideas? Okay, I think one of you have got it. Yeah. So on stream, you're catching up to this, I guess. So this position with the two rooks like that and the queen here, what does white play in this position? Still a number of issues here, tactically. Yeah, it's yeah, and actually this is quite topical for me. That in this position, well, you can get to this by a calculation of forcing moves. Rook takes, queen takes. It's funny to think. I was just thinking earlier today about a concept, just extending a Nimzovich, which I might as well mention now. Is you can almost often, and it's not. This is a very simple case of winning material. But you know, when you undermine pawn chains at their base, in a way you can also undermine pieces. The base of the piece here can be undermined. You can undermine this queen by taking away its base with rook takes d8, and then the queen drops off. It's just the thought that you can undermine pieces as well as undermining pawns. Just using the undermining concept. You might have more complicated examples where that idea is useful. I thought I'd mention it, but anyway. So in this position, it's big trouble for black. He played queen f7, and now there's this pin set up. So rook takes c5, unfortunately, is quite simple now. So I'm not testing on that because of that pin. The king went here, and white now used the pin again with rook c7. So pretty nasty stuff. And black resigns here. So if, for example, queen g6, with the rook on the 7th, just now queen d5 is apparently a forced mate now. Forced mate. So say check. It's like mating. It's horrible. So black resigns there. So I thought the game was interesting. Just to underline the segment I thought was really interesting was just this small little thing here. You might not think is significant. This f5 compared to e takes d4. You can see what sort of disastrous consequences these positions can have later if you get a bit passive. That even though it seems as though e6 is a blockade square, but the d6 square is just horrible for creating pins and these being liable. You see that white built up quite nicely. So this is the game which I think Gata Kamsky was drawing games before this one. This was his first decisive game. So that was quite interesting. But the real hero of the championship so far is a player called Lenderman. So let's have a look at Lenderman, who I think's leading the tournament at the moment, and how he dealt with Ray Robson, who was higher rated than him. So Lenderman is 2582. So playing against Ray Robson 2631 in round 4. Let's have a look at this game. So Lenderman playing white c4, and Robson apparently is a fan of the Grunfeld defence. So we have a Grunfeld with this g3. This is the Fianchetto Grunfeld, funny enough. So c takes, knight takes, e4, and I'll try and get to the interesting point in the game. So it looks as though standard Grunfeld stuff, where white's given that passed pawn in the centre, but is it slightly vulnerable? Meanwhile, c5 might also be looking a little bit vulnerable, as well as the c4 square here. Now at move 15, this looks a bit odd for black, but the engine suggests just sitting tight with rook ac8 here, and you know, maybe this is okay. It's only given us a small advantage for white, like 0.16, but Robson went very creative here and actually sacrificed the exchange. And I don't know what the compensation is particularly, except, well, if it's more difficult for white to play, he's damaged on the dark squares. There's this nice dark square bishop, so could he get these pawns? Well, let's see. Knight b4, and black is not threatening anything immediate. The c2 square's covered. e3 is more vulnerable than usual. Now white has to play accurately, and he did seem to play what looks to be a very nice move here. Well, one of the nice moves, knight e4. So he's threatening knight takes c5, and black took on d5. So has black got compensation? Well, this dark square pawn in particular looks vulnerable, but c5 is dropping here. That's taken. Queen e7. So it looks as though this is a miserable pawn. Is that compensation enough? Black's got these nice looking bishops. I think white has to play very, very accurately here. If he plays, well, the knight's attacked as well. White actually took on d5. He gave up his Fianchetto bishop. Well, he didn't give up the Fianchetto bishop, because if knight takes, rook takes, we're protecting the knight. So that's a very good move. So queen takes c5. Bishop takes f7. King h8. So this doesn't seem to be what was intended by the exchange sack, because it looks as though white's just doing fantastically well. Okay, he's got the miserable pawn, but he's just won f7. Now plays knight c4. So where is black's compensation? It looks as though this is a disaster so far. Rook ac1 indirectly protects f7 because of knight takes b6 now. We see bishop g4, rook f1, protecting the bishop now. And white tries to exchange off queens. Rook moves. He does exchange off queens now. And this is the quite an interesting moment where everything's held together tactically after knight e5, hitting c5, protecting f7 a bit more. But knight e4 hitting the rook, still hitting this one. And we have this rook f4 now. Which looks interesting. What is going on here? If bishop takes, let's have a look at bishop takes. Rook takes, hits the bishop, so that's fine. So what does black actually do in this position? He played bishop f5, and now white actually played a really fantastic move, which Houdini really likes actually. Can you see what white played in this position? On playtest, you might want to move away from the game tab. So white plays a very accurate move here, indeed. With these two pieces attacked, he had a particular idea, it seems, with Rook F4. That's a bit of a clue. So if I give you 20 seconds here, what would you play with white? It's pretty much forced, really, otherwise it's going to be equal maximum. So white player, hopefully on YouTube that's caught up with now this position soon. So white play. Okay, the move is actually knight takes g6. Very interesting stuff. So let's examine now what would happen if bishop takes, then just bishop takes, and here what does black do? If taking here, he's the exchange down. If taking here takes, this is still good for white, this position, rook versus knight and bishop. This is very good for white. He's got the 2 extra pawns, that's fine as well. Apparently this is okay for white, good advantage for white, +2 nearly. So these are not palatable alternatives. So either bishop, so bishop takes is not. So h takes was played, and we have rook h4 check, which embarrassingly forces bishop h6. The interesting thing here now is white needs to play accurately in this position. Otherwise he's going to lose material, actually. And the idea is not rook takes h6, because then king g7, munch time. No, he just simply calmly protects the bishop, so we've still got this horrible pin, so white's still getting that bishop back. So g5, rook takes, he's the exchange up still, and in this position it still looks like munch time, although now already, so this is remarkable to visualize this position, well, quite remarkable, but in the worst case scenario, white here doesn't have to be that tricky. He can enter the rook versus knight and bishop endgame, apparently. If he plays rook a6, he can give that bishop back, because this endgame here is a little bit difficult for black. This should be okay for white, this endgame. But he plays a different move, which might be technically stronger. He plays actually g4, giving back the exchange. So black takes back the exchange, but after g takes, this is a very precariously placed king. Dog's not approving, I have to shut the door. Okay, so it's a precariously placed king. There's actually a threat now of bishop g6 and rook h7 potentially. So, or other stuff, just maybe bishop d5. So now we get a bit of a grind. Robson is clearly, Robson, if we count pawns, is like 2 pawns down in this endgame. This should be enough for white to win. So we have check, bishop dropping back to support d1, Rook d2, trying to get some counterplay. Rook e6. The pawns are starting to move, giving back a pawn here, but these two pawns are very dangerous. Check, f6, f7. They're all very they're very dangerous pawns. And yeah, the game continues a little bit, and we get another nice little combination at the end coming up. So where black is desperately trying to hold these pawns, well, to no avail, because after king g7, on move 50, can you see the knockout blow that white delivered here in this position? So how do you make progress with the two pawns here? What would you play as white in this position? 20 seconds starting from now. The final move. Okay, this apparently has reached some of you guys on YouTube, this position. One of you. So in this position, to finish off, yeah, it was finished off with Rook G8. So this was the end of Robson in this particular game. Because after knight takes, F takes, queen takes, we have E7, and that pawn is queening because it's check. So that was a very interesting fighting game. Robson, you know, very interesting exchange sacrifice. It just didn't seem to work out. Okay, so let's have a look at another game. Now, Lenderman with the black pieces is also quite interesting. Here in this game against Joshua Friedel, he's rated 2599. Lenderman is playing against the English opening, so we'll flip the board. So e5, so white's trying to grip the d5 square. We see knight c6 here, so black fianchettos as well. e3, d6. So far it looks fairly standard stuff, although I have to say something. Knight f6 is quite interesting to play knight f6. I would often play knight e7. There might be a very subtle difference here in playing knight f6. So d3, bishop e6. So black, if given a chance, will now play d5 to liberate. White stops that with knight d5. Queen d7, as though there's an interest in this bishop exchange. White reinforces d5, and here we see that actually the knight can drop back to e8. If it was on e7, where would the knight go for f5? So that seems to be quite nice for f5, with the knight holding the c7 pawn. So maybe that is a little finesse to note in these systems. So white has this mighty grip on d5, which influences c7, so putting the knight here to retreat it for f5 seems nice. So maybe it's a gain of time, not a loss of time, compared to the knight on e7 earlier. So now bishop h3, taking off that bishop, and now f5. Rook here, rook f7, protecting again c7 if needed. f4. Was black actually threatening anything here? I don't think black is in a position to threaten much anyway. So f4, it looks as though white's got a small advantage. Took, g takes, knight f6, takes, knight d5, queen b3, scrutinizing the queen side. Knight comes to protect b7. The knight is evicted. The knight is evicted. Bishop takes g7. C takes. So white's still okay. He's got the bishop against the knight. White's still okay in theory. D takes. Queen takes. Queen c6 check, getting the queens off. So white's still doing fine. Okay, not majorly. It's not the most interesting brilliancy game I've ever shown anyone this game so far. I've got to say. Okay, white's still better here. So how on earth did black win this game? Okay, let's get to the point. H4, I don't know. H5, E4, why not? Okay, rook D8. It looks as though now D5 might be on the cards. Okay, let's get to the turning point. So King G3, I would say white still got the advantage. White still got the advantage. Now here, I think, fine. Rook D1. Black is up to no good on the C file, though. Black might be up to no good on the C file soon. I think after Rook DE1, this C4 is all of a sudden quite weak for A4. I think white should have played maybe just this apparently. The engine's suggesting this or bishop E1 and it's about equal. But after this starts to slip for white now. After F takes. Because if rook takes, the knight has actually got a beautiful square on F5. And we're hitting also H4. White's been positionally murdered here. Backward pawn, isolated pawn, isolated pawn. It's horrible. But after this, then rook C4 is a pain. So black is in the driving seat all of a sudden. Because of that A4, this pressure on the C file. And now, instead of routinely taking the pawn, if he routinely took the pawn, then white would be fine with E5 here. And this apparently this is fine for white. Nasty threat of E6. So this position would be actually very good. But black actually played a very, very clever move in this position before grabbing on A4. He played actually D5. So trying to undermine that F5 square, breaking up white's pawns. Very, very important finesse. I don't know how many of you would have done this, but it breaks up white's pawns even more. So after white didn't even bother with this. Well, knight takes D5 anyway, and that's no good. This pin, well, there's F4. So if rook here, we can take on F4, and the pin is of no significance. So basically, white played A5, and this is really positionally cruel because the knight now triumphs over the bishop because it has the F5 square, and white's pawns now are fragmented. So the beauty of white's position has disappeared with this pawn fragmentation. White doesn't even bother. White would lose material, in fact, if rook takes E4. Can you see what black could play here, which just wins instantly if rook takes E4 was played? What would you play here with black? White's clearly been outplayed. This is just the variation now, rook takes E4. So black to play here, what would you play with black in this position? Actually, you can see this as another interesting case of what I'd call undermining pieces. You know how pawn chains can be undermined at base, so you can undermine the rook on D2 here. That's quite a big clue. How would you undermine the rook on D2? Probably don't need that clue actually. But if any of you find that concept of undermining pieces useful, because I might start using it more and more in live commentary videos, please let me know. Yeah, the piece is undermined, its only support is here. So imagine this was a pawn chain. I'm just thinking it's just a useful concept to apply to winning material. You're undermining the piece with rook takes c3 check. Of course you don't need any concept here, it's just basic forcing moves, but I like concepts, so I thought I'd mention it. So king e2, now black is clearly better here, +2, so rook takes, it's a mop-up job, the pawns are fragmented, the knight's actually better than the bishop now, but white struggles on a little bit, so the game continued like this. And this ending is just a mop-up job. The pawns are actually away from the bishop colour as well, which is useful for black. So yeah, and these pawns are going to fall. So anyway, yeah, it just shows that the status of the game is important. Not maybe it's not an immortal game, but it was a bit of a grind with the black pieces, showing how Lenderman can play quite, you know, solidly with the black pieces. Now this was an interesting game of Ray Robson that I want to show you. So Ray Robson here playing against Erenburg in round 1, I think. So let's flip the board here. So this was an attempt for black to play very, very solidly with this system, the Petrov defense. And Ray Robson chooses the trendy knight c3, which I think has injected interest into this opening. So knight takes c3, d takes, bishop e7, bishop e3, knight c6, queen d2. So white prepares to castle queenside, bishop e6. So it makes the game quite interesting. In fact, let's have a quick bishop takes a2. I think we just munch the bishop. We're going to play this next move. We're just going to munch that bishop. There's no, I don't think there's any counterplay here for black. Actually, king takes b3 is essential, though, but there's not enough compensation there for black. If here actually this can get diabolical for white. Check, queen a8, and black will be winning. But no, in theory, with best play, this is not working. So that's to be trusted. The pawn can't be taken. So queen d7. Now the king does protect a2. Bishop f6. h4. Black castles queenside, and we see bishop g5. So it seems, what has white got out of the opening? White's inflicted, self-inflicted double pawns. It doesn't seem as though there's a great deal to celebrate. Bishop takes, h takes, so another set of double pawns here. But on the other hand, this gives the h4 square for some rook lifts, potentially. Bishop g4. Rook c1. Rook c1. Sorry, yeah, I have played through this game before, but don't you think rook c1 looks a bit funny? It's unpinning. Yeah, it's got a logical point that the knight is now free to move. Okay, so the bishop snaps it off before the knight dares move out of position, because white is now threatening things like knight d4, which could be annoying. So the bishop snaps it off. So we have got some more dynamic imbalances. The bishop versus the knight. So f6, f4. But white's structure is a bit fractured. King b8. But the bishop looks quite good now on this diagonal. And if only the rook could switch in like this. So rook df8, rook ce1, knight e7. And then we see c4. And the rook looks as though it could switch in now to support the bishop. Knight g6. And in fact, we do see the rook lift, rook h3. So the rook's going to come over here. So it's a bit of a fun game, I thought. F takes, rook b3. Black protects with c6, fg. Okay, there's a bit of a hold on f4 here. That's used knight f4. Bishop. The bishop actually goes to f3 here. Is that important? Apparently bishop h1 might be playable as well, or f1, but it goes to f3. Fine. h6, and here white switches to try and get a rook on the 7th, sacking a pawn potentially. Black dare not take that pawn here. This rook on the 7th would be very strong. This is like +6. If where's the queen go? Because now queen b4, we're going to mate black potentially, or do some serious damage. Queen takes d6, rook takes b7. This looks horrible. Check, check, check. So that sort of thing should be avoided. So black actually protected the 7th rank with rook f7, and this gives white time to play g6. So this is very, very interesting because it's still to do with getting to the 7th rank. So very interesting move. After knight takes, bishop h5, and now this horrible pin means the 7th rank infiltration is happening. White takes, the bishop's done its job, getting this rook to the 7th. Will this be devastating enough? Queen d8. The engine suggests white's actually doing quite well here, small advantage. c5 was played. Apparently black could consider taking here. There's no major thing wrong. Well, black did black did take there. That is probably the best move. If d5, then this is actually, funny enough, d5 is actually a lot worse than dc. After d5, check, queen f7, and this looks horrible. If the rook moves, a4 to give the king some air, and with this thing, this is quite dangerous. Rook e8, yeah. So there's no back row mate trick. So rook e8, that's quite dangerous. So we see that after c5, d5 looks as though that's losing quite quickly, but d takes c5 is much safer than that variation. Here on the check, this doesn't work as well because of rook d6. So that first rank is hit quite quickly compared to the d5 line. So this is fine. This is actually better for black. So a very accurate move here. That d takes c5. So we see rook d7, queen h4. Now this might be the first significant mistake of this game. Apparently black should in theory be okay with, well, almost okay with queen g8 or queen c8. But this move, apparently this looks like a losing move potentially, with just making some space for the king to prepare for the rooks to come down. White actually played queen a5, which is not apparently as strong. If a3, white is threatening just to bring the rooks down. But so queen a5, and black played rook c8, defending that c7 square. Queen takes c5, and now we see queen g5, queen b4, threatening mate. And here again, a simple move. The engine's crying out to just make some air for the king. Seriously, the engine's suggesting just a3 or a4 here. And actually, finally, Robson does play this. Because just rooks coming down here will be terminal. Just get both rooks on the 7th, basically. It's as simple as that. This is just an awkwardly placed rook in this position. So we see c5, queen b5. c5, queen b5. The rook's still going to come down to e7, or there's queen a6 now. Rook comes over there. Queen a6 threatening mate. And here it's just terminal. Black's king has been busted wide open in this position. White's just forcibly winning this. Rook takes c7. So now if taking here we lose the queen to rook e8. Well, it's mating actually. So this would be mating. So the king has to take, and this is not good news. Check, check. After rook d1, black resigned. So I think the interesting moment of this game, I think the ingenious moment of this game is this g6. The whole thing about getting the rooks to the 7th rank and making that rook awkward, I think this was fairly ingenious because the rook wasn't helping in the defense of black's king. Yeah, it seems this wasn't the best defense. In fact, I don't know why in this position. No, rook d-e7. Rook d-e7 is actually quite a menace with the idea of queen d7. So that would be a very, very accurate move here, as well as just a3. So queen a5. Apparently black could have done something better around here with rook e6. Wow. If rook e6 had been inserted here, because we've got this back row issue, then apparently black, this could have been a different story. This game could have just been a draw. This position, it's not so clear. So sometimes one has to be extremely resourceful and just actually use the back row as a saving resource. So rook e6, that would be almost like it's like a saving resource. So this is why in particular some accuracy from white in this position with the immediate a3, just to stop these sort of resources. But anyway, Robson got round to getting a dangerous position in any case, because this wasn't kind of played. So black in this position, queen g5 instead, puts white in the driving seat again, massively, actually massively, after queen b4. So yeah, slight nuances in defense can make all the difference to disasters on the 7th rank. So let's have a look now at Gariev against Akobian. I think this is my final game to check out. So Gariev against Akobian. This was played in round 5. So Rusin Akobian, d4 e6 will flip from black's perspective. So Gariev is 2751 UCF, United States Chess Federation ranking, 2732 for Akobian. And the game started like this: bishop g5 c6, queen's gambit, knight d7, knight e4. This looks like a Capablanca's freeing maneuver. Bishop f4, bishop d6, bishop takes, knight takes, bishop d3, and Rusin plays queen g5, knight f3, the queen drops back, white castles, knight b6, seemingly not bothered about e4 because white's going to isolate this queen's pawn anyway. E4 takes, now plays g6. We see queen c5 stopping black castling. Is that a concern? Not really. Queen e7, rook fe1, bishop e6 shielding the king. So he's got the isolated queen's pawn to work on. Knight g5. At this moment white is better technically. Queen takes, d takes, knight d7. Okay, white protects c5, black castles queen side, bishop f3, So what to do about e6? There's a problem here that if rook de8, can you see white's got no, well, d6 is a problem. White's got this, that looks pretty good. Rosen actually, he played rook he8, offering the h7 pawn. That's quite interesting. That's interesting, offering the h7 pawn to trap the knight. Seems out of play with f6, but now we see white playing bishop g4. And I think this knight must be getting out here safely. If bishop takes, I don't think we can try and trap this knight. If taking and we try and win this, then rook e7. So I don't think the knight's trappable that easily after bishop g4. So black played f5, and we see the bishop dropping back. So the knight's now got g5 as an escape square. So yeah, black is pawn down, bishop c4, but he seems to have active pieces. Okay, so here a3 was played, a5, knight e5, so threatening to double white's pawns potentially. Is white bothered? No, he just takes on a5, knight d3, looking at f2 and c5 now, knight g5, knight takes f2. So still white is only fractionally better here. His extra pawn is really not great because these pawns are all fragmented, so this is great to have with the black pieces, this position. Rook c1, bishop a6, rook c3, the knight d3. This is a grinding game. Yeah, I found the most exciting games possible from the US Chess Championship. But yeah, these are how a lot of games go. They're just these grinds. I don't know what I can do. I wanted to show you some games from the championship. I wanted to try and find some interesting moments, but a lot of the moments are like this. I can't help it. I'm sorry. We can whiz through the moves. h4. The king comes to d7. Knight h3, rook e5. c5 is weak. King g3, knight takes c5. a5 is going to be weak after potentially. King d6, rook e7. h5, black takes, king takes. Bishop d3 check, bishop g6. So these pawns look a bit wretched still. Check. Okay, we get some exchanges. King h4, black takes, rook h7, king e5, g3, c5, and black has now got a clear advantage. So something's happened for black to have a massive advantage now, decisive advantage. So where did white go wrong? Just quickly, I just want to notify you where white went wrong. Probably here. This might have been not helping white's cause at all, but it's a difficult position. King g5, and apparently it's still minimal advantage for black. So something weird's happened in this rook and pawn ending. Black can just go like this, but apparently here this should be almost okay for white. Just a small advantage for black, but in this case after a4 something's gone horribly wrong. I think it's black's c pawn really that seems very quick. So with rook c7, this c pawn is a lot quicker than this pawn, and it's just winning the game for Rosen with the black pieces. And it's Rosen's only win, so you know, at least I avoided showing you his draws. So he won. Now black won, white resigned. So yeah, some of the games, as you can see, they're really long positional grinds in the endgame. but you know, someone's got to show the games. So sorry if it wasn't that interesting. Anyway, so comments or questions on YouTube, and maybe there'll be some even more exciting games next week. Okay, thanks very much. See you next week.